People here in the Peace River Valley call this northern BC prairie simply the Peace.
Here we come, little pigs.
And it's where Noni Weidman is trying to find hers after losing her last farm and nearly everything else.
It's coming. There you go.
She was unable to work or even move.
There we go.
All because she wanted relief from a simple, albeit embarrassing problem.
I just wanted to be able to cough without wetting my pants, to sneeze, not be embarrassed about the whole problem that so many women face, and I just wanted to have a belly laugh that, you know, I didn't have to cross my legs and do the stork pose.
Noni shares the same problem as thousands of Canadian women, urinary incontinence. In the 90s, doctors began implanting a special mesh to support the urethra or other pelvic organs in women. In 2008, it worked for Noni for about 6 months. Then came signs of a serious problem.
First, it was painful intercourse. Like being intimate with your husband shouldn't mean you're sore for 3 days afterwards.
Pelvic exams by doctors made it worse.
I felt like I had a knife in my crotch, and I walked funny. It was painful to walk. I became socially isolated. I didn't want to go anywhere.
Noni continued to suffer alone, unclear why. So she set out to investigate on her own.
And I felt like it was a criminal scene investigation because I felt violated.
Then came a bizarre discovery.
I filtered the debris from my urine in these. That little lint was all a blue color.
A microscope she borrowed from the local high school revealed blue plastic fragments.
I'm not crazy. This is real. This is happening, and this is wrong. How can a product that was approved for sale in Canada, if it had been tested, how can it be breaking apart in my body?
Noni continued to suffer, unable to persuade her doctors the pain came from the mesh coming apart inside her.
And then when I tried to show a doctor these fibers, he wouldn't even look at the samples I provided. And that was when I was in agonizing pain.
Unknown to Noni, in 2005, 9 mesh makers in the U.S. started getting complaints over serious reactions to pelvic mesh. 3 years later, she had hers implanted, just a few months before the FDA warned doctors in the U.S., but nothing in Canada for almost 2 years. And no one told Noni until she found the Health Canada notice online a year later.
Piggy porridge.
She's not alone. It's a chronic problem. Companies informing Health Canada long after other countries are warned of problem devices. Still, if it was such a big problem, how did it get approved for sale? Prescription drugs take years of clinical trials to prove they're safe and effective, but not medical devices, as Noni found out.
I wanted to know how the products were tested.
Noni wanted to see what proof Health Canada had that her mesh was safe. But get this, she's not allowed to see the information about the product put inside her.
I think I have a right to know about the product in my body.
So she dug deeper into the world of medical device regulation and discovered a little-known shortcut that gets devices to market quickly.
In the States, you don't have to provide the clinical studies if it's similar or equal to the product that's already on the market.
And Health Canada verified to us that's how it works here. Licenses are based on an earlier generation of a similar device. No new proof needed for the 60 pelvic mesh that have been on the market, including Noni's from 2007. All of them were based on the first one from 20 years earlier, in 1996. Problem is, that one was recalled within 3 years after hundreds of women complained of erosion and infection.
I think doctors blindly trusted that the devices were tested thoroughly and that the clinical studies they'd done proved it was a gold standard of treatment. They didn't understand that we were guinea pigs.
weak evidence, faulty devices, and warnings that come too late. There are thousands of other implantable devices on the market Health Canada licenses as medium or high risk. Data we obtained shows they are suspected to have played a role in incidents in which about 1,400 Canadians died, and more than 14,000 were injured, and more than 80,000 incidents that had the potential for injury or death. These incidents account for 10% of all devices on the market. Those are the official numbers which Health Canada acknowledged to us are underreported, and experts say it's just a small snapshot of reality. So this is data that we got from Health Canada Adverse Events, and research by surgeon David Urbach shows doctors in Canada frequently aren't reporting problems with devices because they don't want to be blamed or they just don't know they should.
The question of who's responsible for ensuring the safety of devices is a very good one.
And it's voluntary for doctors. Only companies are required by law to inform the government. Sometimes the only evidence devices are safe comes after they're implanted.
The way I describe devices are that essentially they're all somewhat experimental. So I think thinking of them as sort of like a large clinical trial within which we're all participants is probably a very constructive way to think about how we use medical devices.
Gloria McSherry's hip implant was supposed to be anything but experimental.
I'm afraid I'm never going to be well again. That's the way I felt. I felt like I was never going to be well again.
After years of running and arthritis, Gloria needed what she thought was a routine hip replacement. After all, 50,000 hips are replaced every year in Canada. But her surgery in 2007 left her with one leg longer than the other.
Every day my leg would be a different length. So some days it would be an inch longer on the operated side, sometimes only 1/8 of an inch longer on the other side, but you always felt off kilter.
At first, she was told that was normal, but it wasn't getting better.
And then after about 2 weeks, I felt literally like I'd been hit by a truck. I was having trouble walking. I was having trouble moving. It was very painful.
Pain that only got worse, yet doctors dismissed her symptoms.
I had a doctor suggest to me that I was depressed. And because I was crying and begging him to do something. And I said, no, I'm not depressed. I'm in pain.
There was a community of people who knew a lot about this in the U.S.
What Gloria and her husband didn't know was that she received a new model of hip, this one, the Durham Cup by Zimmer. And within a year of Gloria's operation, a top U.S. surgeon warned it wasn't properly adhering to bone.
We just don't know what people knew and when they knew it.
The FDA suspended sales. She only learned about it in an email from a U.S. specialist, who they turned to in desperation.
But at the end of this thing, it says they would hit the edge of the cup when they'd open the patients up inside and they would just pop free. Can you imagine, like a part just popping free out of...
It was a year later before Zimmer recalled the artificial hip in Canada, but no one told Gloria, though she did get a letter from the hospital.
It was a form letter to say, you've received this, you should know that it is subject to a class action suit.
See that one? It's white.
One would expect it was the job of doctors to report faulty devices, and Toronto pathologist Jagdish Bhutani did try.
This way. I tried to call Health Canada. I tried twice to tell them, look, this is what I have. Tell me what you can do for me, or with me, or for the surgeons. I never heard back from them, unfortunately.
So what part of the heart is that there?
This is the top of the heart.
Dr. Bhutani studies problems with artificial heart valves. If one fails, the patient could die. So when he warned the manufacturer of one particular model that it was failing, it still took the company 2 years to recall it.
Very interesting story.
All the while, it was still being implanted in patients. That was 20 years ago. Bhutani says he still routinely sees other heart valves failing today and denials.
Well, the manufacturer's reaction is the same as before. I have 8 of these that have failed, and you're telling me there's nothing wrong. They said, we don't think there's anything wrong. No other surgeon thinks there's anything else wrong. Dr. Bhutani, what you're looking at is the old model of the way. We've come out with a new valve, new and improved. This is not going to fail that way.
We came to Ottawa to get some answers from Health Canada about their medical devices program. They would only respond by email, but we found 2 former employees willing to talk.
You go up on the roof, you see the telltale sign of a real lab.
Andrew Douglas and Yossi Karov were government scientists testing everything from surgical equipment to hip implants.
Do you have any idea?
Both are retired now. Health Canada closed its labs 8 years ago. That work is now outsourced. Often it's done by the device makers, essentially policing themselves.
I mean, in fairness to Health Canada, it would be impossible to thoroughly check every device. But I think there's a public misconception that there's a great level of protection, whereas in fact, there's a great level of bureaucracy, but in my opinion, very little actual protection for patients.
It reflects to some level of incompetence in the upper management. They didn't have the technical background, and somehow, possibly not even the sense that this is really important. I think what was missing is genuine care for the patient.
Gloria McSherry settled with Zimmer. The company refused to comment because of other lawsuits. Her faulty hip is now replaced, though she'll never run again. It's not the only thing she lost.
You feel betrayed. You feel that your trust wasn't warranted. You feel sick. You feel duped. You're the person in pain, and you're the person who has gone through this bad procedure, and it's really not your job to be sorting it out.
This is my therapy. I come out and look at the calmness. The sheep are calm, and when everything's peaceful and calm, I'm content.
Noni Weidman had her mesh removed 7 years ago. The company pulled it from the market a year later, calling it a business decision. Noni's now campaigning to have mesh procedures banned. She's also built an online network of mesh patients all over the world, so no one feels alone. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Fort St. John, BC.
And Vic will be back tomorrow night on The National with more on his investigation. In the meantime, you can search a database of hundreds of thousands of devices, a database CBC News has put together. Just go to cbcnews.ca/medical devices. You can search by the brand name, the manufacturer, the type of device, or your health problem.